Today's reading will be in the book of Esther. We will start in chapter 1 and do the first 11 verses. The book of Esther. Please stand when you find it for the reading of God's word, if you're able. Esther chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. In those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days, in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple, to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law, none did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the offices of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbonah, Bigtha, and Agapatha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was fair to look upon. Thank you, Lord, for your word. We just pray that you bless this service and bless the pastor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You could be seated. Another great list of baby names for all those expecting mothers. Biztha, Harbonah, Bigtha. I've never met a Bigtha before. Carcass. I mean, come on. These are great names. All right. So we're starting a new series in Esther. How many of you thought I was going to Samuel? So let's back up and give you get everybody kind of remembering what all we've covered, because I was kind of shocked, actually. I don't even know how many years we've been doing these. I didn't necessarily know. I don't think that they were all fitting together, but we did Life of Moses. That covered Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all that was in there. And so after that went into Life of Joshua. It just made sense. And then led into the Judges, so we might as well talk about the Judges. And then after the Judges, I talked about how that includes 1 Samuel, and that includes Ruth. And so we went ahead and did Ruth. And I actually thought in my mind that I was going to start into 1 Samuel. But you know what? I've preached on the story of Hannah and Samuel, but then we did the life of David, which is like the very beginning of 1 Samuel. We already covered that. That's what started our Sunday night series, where we've already done the kings, and so now we're going into we went into the captivity, and now they're coming out of the captivity. We're in Ezra and Nehemiah right now. So man, we're just getting the Bible preached, and so I've got to go back and do Genesis at some point. And then all those prophets, like they all fit into the time frame that we've already covered, and I've made reference to some of them, but I don't know how much I'll go back and detail some of them. But we're getting in, then we'll just be back in the New Testament. And I've already preached a bunch of the New Testament series on the Sermon on the Mount and different things like that. So it's pretty exciting, but we haven't gone through Esther. And it makes sense because we're finishing up talking about, let's see here. We're talking about, on Sunday nights, we're talking about Ezra and Nehemiah, that time frame when they go back into the land. Well, Esther takes place kind of right in between those time frames, okay? In fact, as we were talking about the hatred towards the Jews and stuff like that, well, we're kind of reading some of that in Ezra and Nehemiah and some of that was going on in the land. So they're pretty neat. It's just keeping it all together, keeping that timeline in your head when it all fits together. But for me, it's helped me as a pretty new pastor to be able to go through these and get it in my head and learn some of these things. Okay, so we're starting in the book of Esther. I've preached some messages on Esther, probably more to do with just, like when we were preaching through Journey Through the Bible, where whatever we did for our Bible reading that last week, I preached from there. I know we stopped in Esther, and I preached on that before, but didn't go through and do a series that I can remember. And so I thought we would go ahead and do that. It's not super long. But we would begin here with Esther 1. And I'm not going to do a whole lot of background and the details concerning the king of that time and all that, other than to say where it fits into what we've already been reading. Like I said, we're right in that time of Ezra and Nehemiah going back into the land, trying to get the temple built. Well, there were a group of people who stayed in Babylon, and they didn't go back into the land. So as Babylon was then overrun by the Medes and the Persians, a lot of Jews stayed there. And so this is what's going on in Babylon, in that region as we follow Ezra and Nehemiah going back into the land. Okay, if that didn't make any sense to you, that's fine. but it is kind of neat to follow this up. All right, so Esther is in a very important book to the Jews. Even today, they make a lot of reference to that. In fact, March 6th and 7th, the Jews celebrated a feast called the Feast of Purim, which I'm not super familiar with, but I do know that that has to do. In fact, that's at the end of this chapter. Go ahead and look at Esther 9 real fast. The end of this book. I don't know why I said chapter. We see the start of this feast. Verse 15, chapter 9, verse 15. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they left not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's province gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 70 and 5,000, but they laid not their hand on the prey. And the 13th day of the month and the 14th day, the same rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. And so it talks about this Purim, the day of Purim, as we go throughout the chapter. It talks about that in verse 31 to confirm these days of Purim in their times. And so that is just something to realize, that the book of Esther is something that to the Jews, to that culture, they like making reference to this, where the Jews were saved from annihilation. Now, it's not the right message for me to preach about what I think about the Jews that are living there today in that land, but historically, this is very important to them because they are preserved as a people. So there are some things about Esther that in the next few messages we might talk about. It might won't necessarily be introduction, but it'll kind of be introducing this book without me doing a whole sermon just as an introduction. I'll make reference to little things that'll help us understand what's going on during that time. But the book of Esther, one thing I noticed right away is a lot of feasting going on in the book of Esther. And that's why I want to start by preaching this message. Title of the message is Excessive Partying. Okay, I talked about it in Sunday school a little bit, where we were talking about the celebration of birthdays and such. I think I called it excessive celebrating, but actually the title is Excessive Partying. Okay, same idea. We see this a lot going on. I'm primarily going to talk about this first chapter where it talks about King Ahasuerus and the feasting that takes place. That's how the book begins. And then in chapter 2, look at chapter 2, verse 18, Esther becomes the new queen. Vashti is removed and Esther becomes the queen. And in verse 18 it says, Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the province and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And so they had this huge celebration when Esther became queen. And then later on, if you remember the story, many are familiar with the story already, Esther tries to find a way to explain to the king that Haman is a bad guy. And one of the ways she does that is by making a feast for Haman and inviting him to the feast. And so that was like she's speaking the king's language. Hey, how about we throw a feast? He's like, all right, I love feasts. Okay, so they have a big feast, and then there's that. And then, of course, at the very end of the chapter, we already talked about the Feast of Purim. The Jews say, hey, let's celebrate this with a feast, a 2-day feast. And so lots of feasting and partying going on here in the book of Esther. So it seems to me like anytime you have a nation that's doing a lot of feast and celebration and festivals and all this kind of stuff, it tells you that the nation's probably at peace. And it's probably enjoying the wealth and the spoils and everything that they've got, and they're just showcasing that, and probably, most likely, getting idle. You know, I remember you lived in Japan many years ago. Dad was in the military. We lived in Japan. Man, it was thriving. They were cutting-edge technology. They were, hard workers and all that. And it seems like something happened over the years. There's no war. There's a lot of peace. They're protected by their allies, and lots of money and wealth because of all the technology and everything. And now we look at the nation and we find out there's a lot of things going bad with Japan. I haven't researched it lately, but where there's a lot of people not working, and there had to be a little push because, hey, in the United States is the same way, but all the kids like staying home playing video games and living, they don't want to work because it's just such an easy life and not a whole lot to do. And so this comes up a lot. And I would say that this nation right now, the Medes and the Persians, he's got it all set. They've got all the land. It talked about from India. This is the reign of King Ahasuerus in verse 1. From India even unto Ethiopia. My map up there, I finally got up past India. I've worked my way up into the colder climates of Russia and everything. And you can see that from India, I still got some more to go, I know, but all the way over to Ethiopia. I mean, that's that whole central region there. And so all of it was set. That was like the mightiest forces in the world. And they've got it conquered, and he's got his, no doubt, his governors over different lands and all that. And so, hey, what else is there to do? Let's just party, and we got all this money for a reason. Let's spend it. And so this seems to be the climate of that culture, which eventually, of course, the Alexander the Great comes in and takes advantage of that, no doubt. I don't know the timeline there, but so let me compare that to a time in our society in the early part of our nation, 1700s, our 1600s, 1700s, there was a big, you're familiar with the Puritans in England and everything. They're Puritans. And the Puritans, you might recognize a story called Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, okay? Bah humbug, right? Everybody knows Scrooge, right? Scrooge represented that Puritan mindset where it's like, hey, why do you guys just want to go out there and party? Why are you guys just trying to have this festival and live it up? Don't you know there's work to be done? In a case in that movie, or in that movie in my mind, but the book, I guess I've never read the book. The book, was written from that mindset where Scrooge was the bad guy and, hey, let us have our Christmas celebration and all that stuff. But what we fail to kind of realize, and I'm not saying which side I line up on that, I'm certainly all for, I love the Christmas season, I'm all for that, but what we fail to realize is that society, there was a reality to the point that society just got so much, like everything was a festival. And the Catholic Church had laid out the calendar for the entire year, like this is a festival, and this is a festival, and this is a festival, and everybody, would have their days off, and so these guys that are trying to work and produce things are just like, hey, no, I'm not going to give you another day off. No, we need to work. And so, in our nation, and at the beginning part of our nation, that was kind of the place, the case. Now, after the 1700s into the 1800s, there was still a little bit of a fight, but for the most part, we started recognizing that Christmas season. But before that, there was a huge push for like 100 years or so, 200 years, where they were saying, in the early part of our nation, in the Massachusetts, I believe, is what I was studying, banned Christmas for a season. I mean, for however many years or whatever it was, if you celebrated Christmas, you were going to be in trouble. And they had different reasons for that. They called it a pagan holiday and all this. But I think the main thing was, hey, these people, all they want to do is they want to play. And they don't want to work. There's too much feasting, too much partying going on. I remember when I was working when I was in Oklahoma City and I worked at UPS, I was in kind of a unique situation. It was sort of a rehire situation, and I got on there into management. So I was hired on as like a training supervisor, and I was training new hires as they came in and everything. And so I had a good relationship with work. They knew I went to Bible college. They knew I was studying to be in the ministry, but I showed up to work. I did my job and all that kind of stuff. But we ran into a problem where in time, and I've probably told you this story before, but as time went on, people began to tell me like, hey, we're not hiring Heartland students anymore. And I remember being so sad about that because I was like, man, these are Christians. These are guys going to the ministry. They should be hard workers and everything. But these guys are saying, no, they don't want to work. Every single time there's something going on at the college, some get-together, some meeting, some fellowship or college days or whatever, they always take it off. And it's not like they try to work it out. They just don't show up or whatever because they want to go play. And that was the reputation they had. These guys, they just want to go enjoy their college life and, enjoy the fun and the festivities and all that. And I remember thinking like, man, what a shame that this is the testimony that we have, is that all those Christians want to do is go play and fellowship. Now, look, we all can fall into that. Because, again, hey, this whole week, all the messages, it seems like they're geared towards this kind of thing because there's a lot going on right now that has to do with partying. I mean, this is where we are in the Bible, so I'm not forcing it. But it makes sense that it would be on our mind because every once in a while we have to step back and say, look, is all my life just about partying and all this stuff, which is not wrong to celebrate. It's not wrong to do these things. But it comes to a point in a person's life where it can become excessive, and that's what the message is this morning. We definitely want to be careful not to get into this mindset of excessive partying. Okay, so let me give you 3 points here. Surprise, surprise, 3 points. It's always 3 points, it seems like. All right, 3 points regarding this subject of excessive partying, okay, and what's wrong with it. Number 1, it leads to the wrong focus. All right, if, again, we're not talking about, I just preached this morning or taught in Sunday school about celebrating birthdays and celebrating special occasions and stuff like that. Nothing wrong with it. But if we're not careful, if we have this mindset of excessive partying, it leads to the wrong focus. All right, let's go to our passage here in Exodus chapter, Ezra, Esther chapter 1. And, it starts off talking about King Ahasuerus, who was in charge in those days. And in verse 4, it says, when he, actually go to verse 3. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants. That sounds good, right? His people. He's not just being a cruel, harsh taskmaster, but he's actually allowing them to be part of this feast, his princes and his servants, and the power of Persia and Media, and the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. That's 180 days. Now that's a long party. 180-day feast. I don't know what was going on. Maybe he was still conducting business and still having different things, but there was a feast nonetheless just constant, just excessive partying. And it says, and when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days. I will give another week for the people who weren't able to take part in this. Like, open it up to all the people in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Okay, so we're talking about some excessive thing. But here's what happens when our mind is just always on, hey, we got to have a party, we got to enjoy ourselves, we got to celebrate. It leads to the wrong focus. Our lives should be about, and this might not sound right to you at first, but our life should be about getting our work accomplished. You say, no, that's what a waste of time. You're living your whole life working. Yeah, God created us to work. In the Garden of Eden, he says, like, he made this. He made man for this. And so, he put him in the garden, and he made him. And then after the fall, he put some punishments upon him, and it's like, hey, you're going to work by the sweat of your brow. You're going to do all your work. You're going to work hard. And he implies there, in that, if we go back and read that it was for man's own good. Keep him busy. And so, if your focus gets off and you forget that, hey, you need to work. Look at Exodus chapter 20. 10 Commandments, all right? Exodus 20. And verse 9. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughters, thy manservants, nor thy maidservants, nor thy cattle, nor thy strangers, which is in thy gate. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that in them is, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Now, people have different feelings as to what the Sabbath day is and how we're supposed to observe it now in the New Testament times. But the point that I want to make here is that this verse, yes, it does talk about the Sabbath day, a day of rest. A lot of people start talking like, I got to have my day of rest. I got to have my me day. I got to have that time to unwind and all that kind of stuff. All right, I totally understand that. But did you work 6 days? I mean, 6 days thou shalt do all thy labor, and on the seventh day, our focus tends to be in our society like, well, I got to go to work, but what I really live for is the partying, the off time, and that's not really the case. The Bible says, we should be focused on the work that we have to do. The New Testament talks a lot about working with your hands and doing your labor and getting all those kinds of things done. And then here's another thing, and as a pastor, this is the hard thing for me to balance, because on one hand, I'm teaching, hey, you got to go out there and work, you got to provide for your family, you got to get your job done, you got to be hard workers, be good employees and all that. And on the other hand, I'm saying, hey, you got to be faithful to church, you got to remember to do the Lord's work, and we should be out there soul winning, we should be out there preaching the gospel, and don't forget to read your Bible, and don't forget to pray. And you're like, well, which is my focus? And the answer is yes, that's your focus. All work with your hands, get your job done on this earth. But you know what? Our main focus for being here is bringing honor and glory to God. And so we're doing those things because we have to, and we're trying to find those occasions that we can serve the Lord, in our life. And so this becomes a little bit of a hard thing to balance sometimes. But our focus shouldn't be on all the fun and the feasting and all that stuff. It's not necessarily wrong. I'll get to that here in a minute. But we don't want to be idle. Being idle leads to mischief. Go to 1 Timothy 5. 1 Timothy 5. In verse 11, this is actually talking about widows. And at that time, this seemed to be somewhat of a problem area, I guess. Widows they would no longer have a husband to take care of them, and they would become, they would become somewhat of a burden on the church, I guess, so to speak, because the church would be taking care of them. Our society today is a lot different. It's not quite like it was at that time. But here's what it says about the widows. It says, but the younger widows refuse, for when they have begun to wax wanton against Christ, they will marry, having damnation because they have cast off their first faith. And withal, they learn to be idle. And here's what does it mean? Idle, okay? So they're not working at home. They're not taking care of their family. They don't have anything to do. What's it mean? What happens to them? Wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. So you can see where if you have a lot of time in your hands, you're going to get in trouble. It's going to lead to gossip. It's going to lead to, causing strife maybe, and some bad ideas are being planted in your mind, and so you got to stay busy. There's always something that we can be giving ourselves to, primarily to the Lord's work is what we want to get accomplished. But 2 Thessalonians 3. 2 Thessalonians 3. Let's see here. Verse 10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. Now, why did he have to say that? Because they had a lot of people that weren't working, but they were just kind of like mooching off the church and taking advantage of what they could. And he's like, no, if you're a Christian, here's what you need to do. Focus on work. Focus on getting things done, getting things accomplished. Stay busy. If you're busy, you'll have less time to get into trouble. You'll have less time to be idle. What's that saying? Idle mind is a devil's workshop, right? Or the devil's playground. I've heard it that way as well. It's like when you have an idle mind, there's lots of room. There's room for bad stuff to come in there. And so we don't want to do that. We want to stay busy and focus on. That's what our focus should be. And when we don't focus on the work that needs to be done, then we're more likely to fall into mischief. So when we're working 6 days a week, and we're going to church on Sunday, going to church on the midweek service after work, if we're able to do that, and we're going, find a time to go soul winning, and all the things that we try to force into the church, and we're doing that, and we realize that people's lives are busy. People with families, they got to spend time with their families, so at nighttime they're finding that time to spend together. Maybe they go out on occasions and do something together or whatever. All of a sudden, the whole life that's busy and it's working and it's trying to be productive and all that, all of a sudden, this leaves little time for celebrating. Again, I'm not against celebrating, and I'm going to, talk about that more. But this excessive partying, there's no time for excessive partying because it's work, 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 And I remember, and I know when we get away for something, and we celebrate our anniversary pretty soon. We're going to get away for a couple days, and it's nice to get away. But hey, a couple days is all we can afford, not just financially, although that's true too. A couple days is all we can afford. We got too much to do. When you're gone, things are just going to get out of your hands, and so it's got to be brief. It's got to be like, hey, this isn't our focus. Well, let's go ahead and celebrate it. There's nothing wrong with that, but we don't want excessive partying. Okay. Number 2, excessive partying encourages vanity and pride. Now, vanity, of course, emptiness, things that are meaningless, they're not important. That makes sense. I mean, again, 180 days? Do you need a party that lasts 180 days so that everybody can see the kingdom and enjoy that? That sounds pretty excessive. Now, although the feasts were for the people, it says that he made a feast for the princes and the servants and all this kind of stuff, and later for the people, I think the feast was really for the king to showcase his kingdom, wasn't it? Now, he says it's for them, he invites them to it, but isn't it really just to showcase what he's got and what he's able to? And this is often what partying is all about, like, hey, flashing the money and flashing all those kinds of things. And so it encourages vanity and pride. Look at verse 3 again. I'm sorry, look at verse 4. Oops, lost my place. Let's see here. Esther chapter 1, verse 4. Okay, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. So he's obviously showing his riches and showing his glory. That's the motivation behind this. All right, verse 6. Where were white, green, and blue hangings, fastenings with cords, and fine linen, and purple, to silver rings and pillars of marble, and beds were of gold and silver, upon a pavement of red and blue and white. Hey, red, white, and blue. And black and marble. Hey, don't look at the walls. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, and vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. So you see, he's obviously showcasing all of his wealth. And then you get into verse 9, and the queen at that time, King Ahasuerus' wife, was King Vashti. And look what it says in verse 9. And Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house that belonged to the king Ahasuerus. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, and all these people to bring, verse 11, bring Vashti the queen before the king with the royal round, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. Now, there's nothing wrong with being proud of your wife and wanting her to be beautiful, but and all this kind of stuff. But to show Vashti, I must have said something wrong. Somebody have to tell me later what I said wrong. Okay, but to show off Vashti and to wanting to showcase her and calling her from the feast and all that is, that just shows what King Ahasuerus is trying to do. And he's just trying to showcase what he has and what his possessions are. Okay? Now, go to chapter 2 real quick, and I want to show you something else that's strange. Now, we don't know much about Vashti because, we only have that one chapter that talks about her. But then the attention goes to Queen Esther and the people that are kind of like, it's like a beauty pageant almost, and they're trying to prepare themselves for the king, and he's going to choose which one's going to be the next queen. Now, I want you to look at the excessive preparation that goes into these women preparing themselves for the king. Look at chapter 2, verse 12. Now, when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for purifying of the women. I understand women wanting to smell good, but 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, like they just want their body to just be saturated in this oil and this fragrance and all this stuff. And so a whole year of preparing themselves so that they can stand before the king and have this beauty. Now, when we get ready to go to parties, isn't that something that people do? They spend a lot of time preparing for the party and getting all fixed up and having just the fancy clothing and the makeup, and hopefully not the guys, but the makeup and doing their hair just a certain way, and got to have the shoes that match and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like this excessiveness. Now, again, I'm not saying celebration's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to get a new outfit or something like that. But this excessiveness is all about vanity and pride and trying to showcase what you have. And honestly, as Christians, shouldn't we seek a more modest life? And not trying to be out there and be flashy and get everybody's attention, but to actually just enjoy what we have and continue to do the work, get what we're supposed to get done, and raise our family and do all those kind of things, serve the Lord. We're supposed to live a modest life, but this excessive partying mindset is one that encourages vanity and pride. Number 3, this goes without saying, I guess, but it leads to poverty. Now, well, let's just read this one first. Proverbs chapter 23. Proverbs 23. And verse 21. Now, I feel like you guys are going to say, like, hey, your anniversary is this week, so you're trying to say, like, hey, excessive partying is bad, and so, like, that's why you just didn't have anything planned for you. No, I love celebrating. In fact, I tend to, in my flesh, like it too much. I could easily fall into this, all right? But what I'm saying is we need to be careful not to always try to gratify the flesh with these excessive partying and expenses, and not to seek after that. Most of us can't do it. We have limitations that hinder us from doing it. But we shouldn't even desire that. Proverbs 23, 21. For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and the drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. That makes sense, doesn't it? Somebody who's just only concern is just to feed the flesh. At the end of the day, they're not going to have anything because they spend it all on the flesh. Okay, and so now it's one thing to be, man, I think Elon Musk is still like the richest man in the world right now. And I don't even know where we're at now. Like, is it 11 billion? Or, I mean, after $1 billion, does anybody even need to keep count? I don't know, but, some of those guys are way up there. Bill Gates is still way up there, but he dropped quite a bit after his divorce and all that. But we're still talking about like top 5. We're talking about billionaires. I can't fathom $1 billion. Like, I don't think any of us can. Now those guys can live extravagantly every day, right? King Ahasuerus can live extravagantly every day. They've got the ability to do that. They're probably not going to be poor by throwing a party. You know what I'm saying? But the principle is still there if you're just wasting your money and all that. But I'm not talking to any Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever the big names are. I'm talking to people who probably everyone in this room is on a pretty fixed income. And none of us can afford to go partying all the time. And so, here's the thing. When we try to live, so there's a thing on my, every time I'm on YouTube, I get this advertisement, it seems like. It's like this new site. I don't know how long it's been around, but Temu. If you have YouTube, you've probably seen Temu. And it's like shopping like a billionaire. And it's like trying to talk to people that don't have any money and entice them to go buy cheap stuff or whatever and to feel like they're shopping like a billionaire. I guess. I don't really know what the app is all about, but it's something that has to do with shopping like a billionaire. Right? Because they want to appeal to people that want to be billionaires, and they want to be able to shop and buy whatever they want and to have all these nice things and to party and to live this lifestyle. But you know what? The real thing is, anybody who lives like that, who isn't a billionaire or a millionaire, and even millionaires at some point, like there's boxers and stuff like that who landed on a fight or something that gave them millions of dollars. I mean, there are people that have got like $4 million one fight, maybe more than that. I don't even know. There are athletes well over $100 million. Okay, and these are guys who were poor and then all of a sudden had all this money, and they can blow through millions of dollars like nothing. Okay, and many of them end up being poor again. Now, thankfully, thankfully for them, they have a name that all they got to do is hook up with somebody and, hey, I'll make you rich again. And they just have to sell their soul to the devil. Okay, but the average person who just like has these goals of being a millionaire and living like all these, when we spend money like a millionaire, all it does is show people how poor we are. Isn't it funny to go into a neighborhood like low income housing and they've got these super expensive cars? And in my mind, I'm like, you're gonna get that taken away from you in like a couple months because you can't pay the bills on it. They're gonna come take that away from you. What are you doing with that car? Well, here's why: because maybe they work a regular job, that's good. Glad they have a job. But they work for the weekend. And they work so that they can go partying and they can go clubbing. And so they got a couple nice suits. They might even have their tags still attached inside if you look real careful, so they can take it back when they're done. I used to work at Dillard's, and I tell you, people would come in and say, hey, I bought this. They'd come in on Monday and say, hey, I bought this on Friday, and it's defective. And you're like, man, I can smell the club all over this thing, and there's stains on it. You wore this to the club, and then you brought it back because you knew you didn't have the money to wear it. But anyway, this is the lifestyle people live for, because they want to shop like a billionaire, and they want to go partying and drive up in their really nice car that they're only going to have for a couple weeks, and to showcase everybody and say, hey, look, and throw out the money. Hey, drinks for everybody and all this stuff. And really, any rich person looking at them would be like, man, you're dumb, and you're never going to have money because you're just spending it all on this stuff. I've been told, by the way, I could be wrong because I don't know, but I've been told that Elon Musk, many times of his life, he doesn't live in all those nice houses that he has. He'll live right there in his business. He'll like sleep on a little cot and then wake up and keep doing business. All right? Poor people that think they're living like rich people, they're actually living like poor people, if that makes sense, okay? And I'm fine. I'm one of them, all right? I'm not insulting anybody. If I live like that, you would know, hey, there's something wrong. He doesn't have that kind of money, but he's acting like he does. And so living with this excessive partying type of a life is just going to lead to poverty. It's going to lead to the wrong focus. It's going to encourage vanity and pride, and it's going to lead to poverty. And I'm missing the second page of my notes somewhere. How did that happen? Somehow I'm missing the second part of my notes, but that's okay. I feel like there was one more point I needed to make on that. Let me think here for a minute. Well, anyway, if we live with this mindset of trying to impress people and trying to do all those things, like we're really missing out on the good things that God has given us. Now, first of all, we're supposed to be laying up our treasures in heaven. Okay? We're supposed to be looking forward to that eternal feast up in heaven, We don't know what it's like. In the flesh, we might crave certain things and say, well, I can't wait till I get to heaven, and I'm going to live like this, and I'm going to do this and do that. No, you're probably not. But, in this human flesh, understand that that's the best thing that you can think of. But in heaven, we'll have pure motives and pure desires and all that. So, we won't desire some of those things probably. But our focus should be on serving the Lord, providing, taking care of our families, and doing all these things. And yet, we tend to live in, maybe it's because of the comforts that we've had all of our lives. I realize some people here are old enough to have gone through some tough times in our history. Most people my age and younger, we've never really struggled. We've never really been through hard times. And so that's where you get this entitlement culture and you get all these kinds of things. And people think that they just need to be able to live this excessive partying kind of a lifestyle, and it's not good. It leads to all kinds of bad things. So it leads to the wrong focus, encourages vanity and pride. It leads to poverty. I made a joke about 3 points, but I had a fourth point, but I'm just missing my notes somewhere. So anyway, it was good too. It was going to really conclude all this. And my mind is slipping me. But anyway, I think everybody gets the point nonetheless. When we put our things into the right perspective and seek to serve the Lord and forget this, I know the verse that I wanted to close with, but go to 2 Peter. I'm going to try to look something up real fast. It's weird. I'm going to go on my desk and it's probably going to be laying there, but that's right. Let's see if I can find this. 1 Peter 4. And we'll just close with this because it sounds like I'm done. 1 Peter 4. Okay, so here's the conclusion. We expect that the world is going to want to live this way. The world is going to want excessive party. That's all they have to live for. Give me my Fridays so I can get my paycheck and I can go spend it and I can go get drunk and I can go do this and showcase what I have. Because tomorrow, it's like eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow, you die. They don't have anything else to live for. And so we understand that. Now look at 1 Peter 4:4. Is that what I said? In fact, we're going to go a little bit closer. Let's just start with verse 1. For as much then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourself likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of God. Now here's the verse. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. Now look at this part, verse 4. Wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you, who shall give account of him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. Look, if you are somewhat newly saved and you used to live this kind of a lifestyle that everybody probably can relate to, wanting to have things and to show them off and to have this excessive partying lifestyle and everything has got to be fancy and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you get saved and you're just like, those things aren't really important anymore. What's more important is me spending time with my family and being faithful to my church and working hard and accomplishing things and having the sense of worth and in God's eyes and all that stuff. And all of a sudden that becomes your focus. Well, those guys that you used to run with, they're going to think it's strange that you don't run with them to the same excess of riot and this banqueting and this revelings and all these kinds of things because, that's not your interest. Now, look, we're Baptists. We like banquets. We like potlucks. We like celebrating. But you know what? It would be real easy for us to, in the flesh, turn that wanting to celebrate, wanting to fellowship into wanting to be gluttons and drunken. Now, we don't serve any alcohol here, but you know what I mean? Drunken just simply means to drink too much of something. And even if you don't get drunk, you can spend too much time drinking pop or drinking whatever, coffee. You can spend too much time spending lots of money. And so we have better things to live for than to just serve our bellies and serve our flesh. And that's the point that I want to make. King Ahasuerus, he's of the world, and he owns all these kingdoms, and he has tons of money. Sure, he's going to waste it, and he's going to have parties and banquetings and revelings and all this kind of stuff. That's expected of him. Christians, although we might enjoy ourselves, and we don't, we just don't worry about tomorrow because we don't know what day may bring forth, but we're just living for the moment and serving the Lord. But we're not into this flashy, we shouldn't be anyway, into this flashy and showy and wanting to be excessive in our partying kind of a lifestyle. All right, I hope that makes sense. Let's go to Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for your word. I pray that you'll help us to consider the point of this and consider the nations of the world and even Christians who can fall into this and lose focus of what it is they're here for. I pray that you help us not do that. We do love to have our needs met, and we're thankful for being blessed and when we don't have to worry about paying bills or anything like that, which sure is enjoy. It is certainly is joyful. But Father, I pray that you help us most importantly stay focused on the task that you've given us in this life for the short time we're here. Things that would give us eternal dividends and investing in things above and not on things on the earth, Lord. I pray that you be glorified and help us to remember these things in Jesus' name. Amen.